Susan, if you don't mind kicking it off.
Absolutely. So welcome. It's great to see all of you this evening to hear about the Waterfield Lot redevelopment project that will be voted on at the townwide special election on Tuesday, June 22nd. This proposal by Civico was one of 6 responses in a competitive bidding process last summer. All were evaluated against the town's criteria and moved forward to a set of interviews and then a vote by the select board last October that designated Civico as the preferred proposal and led the town to enter into negotiations with them. After several months of discussions, a land development agreement, or LDA, was finalized. The LDA sets up a process and the basic terms for what will be the operative agreement, a long-term ground lease, for that to be negotiated with Civico for them to design, permit, finance, build, and then manage the 60-unit mixed income building with first floor retail and parking. Town staff worked on drafting the request for proposals that started that off, as well as on evaluating the responses. And also for many years before that, as the town rezoned the town center business district and wrote an affordable housing production plan. With us and presenting will be town planner Brian Zakelli, town engineer Beth Rudolph, town manager Lisa Wong, and Housing Partnership Board Chair John Serbier. Also with us tonight is Dave Tregorth of the Civico team. This will be a 60-minute session. If you have a question, please type it into the chat or the Q&A. I have to admit, I'm not sure which of the two.
Yeah, the Q&A function would be preferable.
Q&A function is for the questions. And we'll read as many of them as time allows. We'll try to combine questions or ask things that seem to be common themes. There will be another opportunity for residents to learn more and ask questions about the project. The Civico team will be having an open house at Winchester High School this Thursday, June 17th, from 5 to 8 p.m. So with no further ado, I'll turn this over to Brian Zakelli, the town planner.
Thanks, Susan. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give an extremely brief history of the rezoning of the town center in 2015. This map is out of the rules and regulations governing the center business district. And you can see here on the Waterfield lot, this is one of 3 planned unit developments, which are areas of dense housing centered around public open space. Next slide, please. So there were a number of charrettes and studies that were performed on this site prior to the zoning changes that helped inform and rewrite the center business district rezoning. So these were not proposed by developers, these 3 slides here. These were simply charrettes and studies. So this was one of the sites that was a clear candidate for a 40R district. 40R districts are 20% affordable. So that was not something we pursued at the time in 2005, prior to the rezoning in 2015. So this area was really envisioned to be transformed, though, into a lively and dense place right near the common and the train station. And the center business district passed the town meeting in 2015 at over 90%. Next slide, please. I guess you're gonna, click all the way through these, and we can just, we'll just put them all up there. So in 2015, I think there's couple more actually. Okay, thanks. So 2015, the zoning changes that allowed this PUD is in PUD 1, Plan Unit Development 1, as well as all over. But this was for housing and mixed use to be by right. So before the 2015 zoning changes, housing was not allowed by right. The idea of these PUDs were to conglomerate sites for integrated development around public open space. The idea is that most of these 250 new units would be downtown. The bulk of them would be in these 3 areas. And then a major part of the zoning was inclusionary housing, which meant that 10% of all buildings that have 6 units or more, 10% of those units would have to be deed restricted affordable. And if you provided more than that, more than the 10%, required, you were able to get a bonus in the height of the building, or potentially the FAR, which is the bulk of the building, essentially making a larger structure. Next slide. So that was in 2015, the rezoning of downtown. And then in 2018, the select board initiated a process with the planning board to do the housing production plan. And one of the programming strategies was to commit suitable public land to housing. This site in particular, the Waterfield Lot, Waterfield parcel, was picked out as a great candidate to commit towards affordable housing. So that was one of the programming strategies in 2018. There are a number of them, other strategies that this does correspond with as well, but the Waterfield parcel is actually named in the HPP. Next slide, please. So that was in 2018. Then in the master plan of 2020, here you can see a couple of goals were to encourage more commercial, mixed use, and compact development in areas that support economic vibrancy, including strategic redevelopment parcels, of which this is one of them, in the town center, and the identified evolving opportunity areas, as well as promote different types of housing that should be located near community gathering spaces to enable access to everyday amenities and needs, like in the town center. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the town engineer, Beth Rudolph, to discuss some existing conditions and the MBTA renovation.
Thanks, Brian. So the Waterfield lot is located just to the south of the town common along Waterfield Road, bounded to the left on this diagram by businesses that front on Church Street and Waterfield Road, and then bounded on the right by the MBTA railroad station and railroad tracks that bisect the downtown. There's also, within the lot is the existing Chamber of Commerce building, which is owned by the town of Winchester. You can sort of see the corner of it in the photo at the bottom left of this slide. The existing use of the lot is primarily for parking purposes. So there are 57 permit parking spaces in the lower section of the lot. The lot is separated by a slight grade differential, and then 36 free 2-hour parking spaces in the upper section of the lot that abuts the businesses behind Church Street. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a plan that the town had commissioned, a survey plan that the town had done several years ago. The lot is actually technically two parcels. The ground lease includes the entire 2 parcels, so it's about just under an acre, 0.98 acres of land. And there is currently a 20-foot wide MWRA store easement that runs through the property from Waterfield Road, actually partially under the Chamber of Commerce building, and then it heads towards the MBTA tracks on the bottom section of the site. Next slide, please. As I'm sure everyone is aware, the MBTA is in the process of finalizing the designs for a renovation of the Winchester Center Station. They just completed an initial demo phase of that work, so it looks quite a bit different out there today than it did, even a few months ago. Below is the plan of what's proposed. So the existing Chamber of Commerce building will remain, and then on the Waterfield lot side, they will be installing a new elevator and then a new set of stairs that will have a center starting point, and we'll have stairs that go out on both sides along the railroad tracks. Next slide, please. This is a rendering that was done by the MBTA that shows the overall station improvements along Laraway Road, and then on the far right-hand side of the plan, you can see the impacts in the Waterfield lot. So it's primarily a glass elevator structure that will abut the existing railroad viaduct. The MBTA project will result in the temporary loss of 14 parking spaces in the Waterfield lot and the permanent loss of 9 spaces once the project is complete. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I wanted to go over just a more recent timeline. I know that the town planner went over sort of a 10+ year history of the town looking at this particular site. But the more recent process is that the housing production plan, it was adopted in 2018, and it outlines a strategy for the town to develop more affordable housing. In terms of the Waterfield lot, the town opted for a two-part process, which of course has a lot of different parts within it as well. But we opted for a request for qualifications where we pre-qualified developers. And then of those pre-qualified developers, we then invite those developers to submit a proposal, sort of the typical request for proposal process that you often see. But instead of opening it up to just about anybody, we pre-qualified developers first. So we had an advisory committee made up of area residents from the neighborhood, businesses, town staff, and other individuals who are versed in affordable housing. And the town issued a request for qualifications. We received 9 proposals, and then we pre-qualified 8 of those developers that we believe met all of the qualifications that were issued in that RFQ. One of those 8 developers did notify us that they weren't interested in submitting a proposal because they were too busy with other projects going on. So we had reached out to the remaining 7 of the pre-qualified developers who were invited to then submit proposals. We ultimately received proposals from 6 developers. And then within that proposal, there are also additional qualifications and information. And we went through an internal process and found that 5 of those 6 developers were to be put forward to the select board for their review. There was a number of public meetings and interviews. All of the 5 that I mentioned, Civico, NOAA, Penrose, Waterfield, Preservation, and WIN, went through public interviews that were on WinCam that also had members of the community and residents and businesses, climate action folks, finance committee. So a number of committees were involved in these public meetings and these interviews and asked to provide input. All of that information, the meeting links, the proposals, they're on the town website at winchester.us/Waterfield. And then started a number of town meeting processes. The first is after picking Civico as the top choice, and it was unanimous among the select board as well as a number of other boards that weighed in. A request to negotiate a land disposition agreement went to town meeting in November of 2020. So town meeting authorized the select board to negotiate a land disposition agreement, and that happened over the course of about 6 months. There were members of the finance committee at the table. There was town staff, and ultimately that land disposition agreement went to the select board for them to endorse before it went to spring town meeting. So in May of 2021, the town meeting voted in favor of the LDA and then authorized the select board to negotiate a ground lease that will be on the next fall town meeting agenda for approval. So lots of public process, lots of meetings, and certainly lots of opportunity for town meeting and the public to weigh in. So in addition to these milestones I mentioned, there's a numerous other meetings that were for the development of the RFQ and the RFP processes. So here is an overview of the 5 proposals that went to the select board. One of the reasons why, or some of the many reasons why Civico was the top choice was in addition to their quality design, their experienced team, there was a number of things that they had hit that were very favorable to the town. The town had really emphasized a number of different things, including the number of affordable housing or deed restricted units. As you can see from the middle column, they have the most proposed units at 40 units. They also have, for having the most affordable units, they also had the lowest height. I know height has been discussed in a number of different projects, especially in the Center Business District. As you can see, at 40 to 48 feet, they're significantly less than all of the other proposals here. Another item that was important to the town is the number of parking spaces. There are 45 private and 40 public spaces that were included as part of their proposal. I mean, I would actually see this as a starting point. This still hasn't been negotiated. This would be the next round of negotiations that the town would have with Civico. But my understanding as part of their proposal is they're the only developer who is going to be building essentially a parking deck. So we'll have a two-tiered structure. I think they're spending about $3 million or more on that structure, which is one of the reasons why they're able to have significantly more parking than any of the other proposals. Best slide showed that there were currently 93 spaces. 9 of those spaces will be permanently taken by the MBTA for their project. So that will leave 84 spaces. They're proposing 85 here, and we'll certainly work with Civico to see if there's other opportunities for additional spaces for parking. They have a pretty robust courtyard, for example, that is beautiful. We love to see that program, but that's an option for parking. A lot of the other developments don't have that courtyard, and they in fact have that for parking. So there's a lot of other opportunities for that. Recently, the select board last summer, the select board converted some of the permit parking spaces to 2-hour spaces. So there's a lot of movement for us to both decide on the programming of those spaces to meet the current needs of the town, as well as to make changes if needed. So again, a lot of that is still to be negotiated. Another thing that was favorable to the town is that of all the proposals, they have the second highest proposed payment to the town. Their proposal was to pay the town $1 million over the first 12 months. We have since negotiated an LDA that actually is more than this particular $1 million. We negotiated a few things in addition to this. One is a base rent, so that we would be getting an additional annual payment. And the second is that we negotiated that we would get a portion of any sale or refinancing. Sale or refinancing could happen in 20 or 30 years, and certainly could happen multiple times throughout the duration of the lease. Okay, so a few things for us as we looked at this analysis. One was looking at the finances, and one was looking at the affordability. This is a very quick overview of the finances, but we had an appraisal that was done that essentially valued each market rate unit at about $75,000 as a net present value, assuming an upfront payment over a 99-year lease. So there's the commonality between the analysis here is that we're looking at that 99 years, and we're looking at a net present value. A typical kind of a typical project could be 60 units, 45 market rate, 15 affordable. In this particular case, the town emphasized throughout the RFQ process and RFP process that we wanted to maximize affordable housing units. And when you do that, then you're not always going to maximize the payments to the town. You're going to be emphasizing the affordable housing units. So sort of taking that same appraisal value at $75,000 per market rate unit, if we're looking at the 20 market rate units, we're looking at about a net present value of $1.5 million over 99 years. So this is essentially what the appraisal is telling us. When we're looking at the negotiated terms, we ended up negotiating terms that we believe is well above the appraised value. First, as you have that upfront payment of $1 million, And then we sort of net present valued the other portions, the other two income portions of the agreement. The annual rent payments, if we assume a 4% discount rate, then we're looking at a net present value of $380,000 for the first 30 years. It's $647,000. Somewhere in that 20 to 30 year time frame, there will be a refinancing. So the town would get 15% of the net profits of that refinancing. And that would actually reset, it would actually, we'd have to recalculate the net present value at that point in time. And that's why we only have a sort of 20-year and a 30-year estimate. But at that rate, it's easy to say that the net present value for a 99-year lease is, over $2 million. So, because the million plus the 647,000 over even just the first 30 years, plus the 15% net profits, this exceeds the appraised value. Okay, so affordability. So right at the top, I have a box that has the area median income in Winchester for a 4-member household. There's a much more broader matrix that looks at, a household of 1 or 2 or 3 or even 7 people. This is the numbers in effect April 1st of 2021. So if you're making 80% of area median income, 50%, 30%, I'm just showing you what that income cap would be. So for a family of 4, there's units that are being proposed as part of the project that are at 80% and 60% of AMI. So you can see that at 80%, you're still looking at a 6-figure household income that would be able to live in this process. Live in this project. So the RFP process weighted heavily the affordable housing component. It also weighted things like design and parking considerations. And you saw that this proposal weighted very highly compared to the others. This has, we have very few affordable housing rental units. The Housing Authority owns most of them. There are some Section 8s throughout town, but certainly there's a high need for affordable rental units in town. And I think that's it. So I will turn it over to you, John, for the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you. In addition to Susan Prodecchio, Beth Rudolph, Brian Zacchelli, and Lisa Wong, Marty Jones is also available to answer questions. Marty is a member of the Housing Partnership Board, the Affordable Housing Trust. She's a longtime Winchester resident, and she served previously as Executive Director of Mass Development. So she brings development expertise to this exercise. Please submit questions under the Q&A function. I want to begin with, maybe we'll try to answer the short ones directly in that longer questions. We will address some of those, or as many as possible in this session. Anything that we don't get to will be responded to on the town's website. And I want to begin with a few questions that typically come up in virtually any conversation about this site. And so we know they're of interest to a broad range of people. And let me begin with a question of Brian. What are the benefits of providing rental housing? Why Winchester is a town of predominantly home ownership? Why do we also need rental housing?
Sure. So there was a Winchester Town Center housing study that was done in 2011 as the rezone was trying to get information in order prior to the 2015. So the study recognized a need for more diverse housing types that are not only affordable to residents with like a range of incomes, but it projected, this housing study in 2011 projected this demand for about 200 new housing units by 2020, divided specifically between homeowner and rental units. So in the town center specifically, the study stated that the units should be both market rate and affordable to meet the needs of empty nesters and retirees age 55 and older, as well as young singles and couples with children. The housing production plan of 2018 and the master plan of 2020 come to the same conclusion. But it's basically saying that we need these housing types for the people that live currently in Winchester.
Okay, thank you. Another kind of high-level design question. Can you elaborate on your slides, from your slides, how the proposed Civico design relates to the town common, since that's adjacent, the new commuter rail station that's going to be built by the MBTA, and to really all of Winchester Center?
Is definitely attractive for a lot of people. Not so much, I mean, definitely the design, but one part that was very attractive regarding the design was that it was the lowest height of the proposals. So the design appears to relate well to the new train station. It's a modern building and use of some traditional materials. The overall design is kind of driven by a sense of creating a vibrant public space that the CBD rezoning is trying to promote, and creating new public spaces is one of the main drivers of the PUD areas. And this archway concept can actually be seen in the potential outcomes from the design guidelines that you see in this town common area, because it's framed through the arch as you leave the development. So I think it was the height of it that made it seem to be more in scale, although this is a large structure. It was the scale of and height of the building that made it more in line with when compared with some of the others. Most of them were anywhere from 10 to more than a lot more taller than that, 10 to 15, 20 feet.
Am I correct? This is a mixed use project, so there'll be commercial stores located along Waterfield?
That was the intent, and that is what their proposal shows.
Okay. For Susan Verdecchio, the town recently adopted a sustainability and climate action plan. Can you describe a little bit how this project contributes to the objectives of that plan?
Sure. Civico's proposal really had the most robust and integrated set of sustainable design features that would advance the town's climate action goals. It includes a high-rated insulation package for the walls, windows, and roof, or what's called the building envelope. And they have a goal of LEED Gold for passive house design. Also includes all electric heating, cooling, ventilation, and hot water, as well as on-site solar to significantly minimize, if not eliminate, the use of fossil fuels. And the site design and landscaping is also environmentally sensitive. Really, the climate action principles are woven throughout the entire proposal. It could be a model for other buildings in the area.
Okay, and kind of another question, general question for you, Susan. Can you elaborate on the kind of economic and financial benefits that this project will provide to the town and to Winchester businesses specifically?
Yes, the goal of having more residential options in the center business district, coupled with street level retail, is to have more foot traffic, more customers patronizing local stores, and just more vitality during the evening and weekend hours. We hope to make the town center more of a shopping destination to keep retail business in Winchester rather than going out to malls or other towns. And we want to build up, and we hope that this will build up our commercial tax base. Also, the parking use now does bring in some revenue to the town, because we have permit parking there. And under normal circumstances, also timed, maybe it's just permit parking. But anyway, the parking brings in some revenue. But having a fully built out, private, fully occupied mixed-use development there with the parking underneath will be assessed property taxes and pay those annually for the town as well.
Okay, a question for Marty Jones. And this is another one that frequently comes up in conversations. Why is the term of the lease for 99 years rather than a shorter time period? And kind of related, what are the benefits to the town of continuing to own the land rather than to selling the land to the developer?
Thank you, John. So most land leases that are done for affordable and mixed income housing are very long-term. Typically, 99 years is not an unusual term for a land lease. Most lenders are going to require that a land lease be very long-term in order to lend on the development. And this development, like every other development, will have to go to the lending market to get financing for the property. So the long-term nature of the lease is important for the developer to invest and for the lender to be assured that they're going to be paid back when the lease is up and somebody else will come in and refinance it. The real benefits to the town, and I think these were part of the conversations early on, is that a land lease preserves the ownership of the land in the town of Winchester forever. And the land lease also gives the town some ongoing control and input into the development. And the town will be able to sit at the table with the developer with a slightly different perspective than if it was just a property owner. So if there are concerns about the development or there are questions or there are things the town would like to see, the town really has a seat at the table because the town is the landlord over the long term.
Okay, I want to kind of move next back to Lisa Wong to get an idea of kind of time schedule, next steps. Assuming the land development agreement is approved, what would be the subsequent steps in the development process for this site? Does this project still have to go to the planning board or the zoning board of appeals? In there, you know, when would construction likely begin? How is that going to be coordinated with the MBTA construction on that? And is there even a preliminary early estimate of when the building might be completed and ready for occupancy?
Great, thank you. So I will, that's a lot of questions in there. I'll answer as specifically as I can. If Brian might want to jump in to elaborate maybe on a planning board or zoning board process, that would be great. We do have the developer here in terms of the actual construction process itself. But the next steps for us is we will be negotiating a ground lease, which will have a significant amount of material terms in there that need to be reviewed, such as the exact details of parking and financing and so on. That due diligence period, then after that sort of 6 months is up to negotiate the ground lease, then we're going back to town meeting. The developers are going to begin to submit initial permitting sets to the select board. That initial permitting set to the select board is sort of part of the initial agreement, but it does not substitute. It only sort of starts the process of then going through planning board, zoning board, where there'll be a process that I think everybody recognizes. It'll be very similar to projects that are being done in the town that might be done on private property. In this particular case, because it's on land owned by the town, it also has all of these additional legal and financial steps. But there'll be significant opportunity for the public to weigh in at that time, including the select board, to continue to weigh in during that particular process. There are a couple of milestones. The developer does have the right to terminate the process 18 months upon town meeting approval. They have about 36 months to go through financing. In terms of coordinating with the MBTA project, actually, the easement documents will be going before the select board tonight. So assuming that those are passed, then we have a sort of an outside termination date for the easements that we're providing to the MBTA of March 2024. So the project could potentially start construction in 2024 or 2025, depending on how quickly the contractor is able to get all the different financing sources. So if they get all the financing sources in the first round, then they can start in 2024. So the MBTA project does not hinder that. But if they need a second year to get financing, which is pretty typical for projects, then that'll be a 2025 start. But I don't know, Brian, if you want to elaborate maybe on especially public input during the review process, how that could certainly change, providing input that could certainly change some of the elements of the project.
Sure. So it's one of two processes that the applicant would be going through. It'd either be a special permit with the planning board or a comprehensive permit known as a 40B with the zoning board. And both of those processes are the same in terms of the level of public input. Those process, a ZBA, a comprehensive permit process lasts a little longer or may last a little longer simply because the statute allows it. But in terms of public input, it's just like any other public hearing, like you said, in terms of which process they were exactly going to be going through. I'm actually not aware of anything in the LDA outlining exactly what process they're going through. So someone else on the call might actually know more than me about that. I think that was all I had.
Okay, a question for Beth, but Brian may want to.
Yep. Sorry, John. I did invite the developer, Dave Tregorth. Certainly, they're the ones that are developing. They're doing their due diligence right now, and they might be able to share more in terms of their timeline for their project feasibility and construction.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. This is Dave Tregorth with the Civico Tregorth team. I think once you all have said it correctly in terms of the timeline, in terms of pulling together our financing and the due diligence period. Once we're under construction, then I think it's probably about a 16 to 18 month process of building the building. And then there will probably be about a 6-month period of, people moving in and leasing up the building. So while it feels like a very long time, and in a lot of ways it is, in order to hit that schedule, we need to be applying for our first round of sort of financing in the pre-app process this fall, and this January as well. So that's the timeline. Happy to answer any other questions.
Okay. Beth, one of the questions that it's been submitted concerns the MWRA sewer easement in there. Between you and Brian, is the Civico design, how does the Civico design accommodate that sewer easement, and what are the building features? Is there any incompatibility between that?
So the current design that I've seen leaves the area over the sewer easement open as access drive or parking area.
So the sewer design will, the sewer line will not interfere with the proposed parking locations?
Not the underground parking.
Brian,
So
do you
this
want to
is-
add anything?
This is Dave. If I could just add a
Oh,
couple
yeah.
things. We've actually had some preliminary meetings with the MWRA to talk about our design around the sewer easement. The sewer there was built, I believe, in the 1800s and is still a brick viaduct. And we've had good discussions with them, and would continue those discussions should this continue. But really, all the issues that we've spotted, we've been able to come up with solutions for. But a key part of it is obviously the fact that our design sort of stays planned north of the easement, with the exception of the passageway, which they also sized up for their trucks and service vehicles, and felt was adequate at this early stage.
Okay, we're jumping in. We've all of a sudden moved to the Thursday open house. Dave, Dave will add you informally to the panel. Can you describe what's going to happen to the existing Chamber of Commerce building? That was another question that's been submitted.
We really want to reuse it. as a useful building. I mean, sort of what we envisioned was sort of as support space for the town common and for the open space that would be right in front of the um, patio area in front of the station. You know, if you need a stage, if you need sound equipment, if you need chairs for anything that's happening in terms of public events, you need easily accessible storage space. So certainly from the perspective of that's one potential use. We've also thought about uses that would be complementary to, you know, commuters, whether that be some kind of kiosk for coffee on the go or things like that. I think ultimately we would open it up to a bit more of a public process and thinking collaboratively with the public about it to get their feedback to make the final decisions. But those are some of the preliminary thoughts that we've had.
Okay, Lisa, I'll let you answer the next one. Can you describe how the town center businesses have been involved in this process, you know, pre-RFQ qualification stage, and particularly how you have worked with the budding businesses on Waterfield and Church Street?
So there are certainly a number of things that are happening in this neighborhood, and there have been several ways in which we have been notifying both area residents and businesses. We've certainly had a strong partnership with the Chamber of Commerce to hold regular meetings and answer questions that they've had. We've also had a advisory committee that we have reached out to residents, especially there was one, I think in particular, that had a very strong architectural background and certainly had a lot of great design and sort of view inputs on that. So during the development process of the RFQ and RFP, there have been the public process and the public meetings to provide the input into those developments, and then the drafts of those RFQs and RFPs were on the website and also discussed at select board meetings, where we also did get input from that. We had a very great development consultant who also did the master plan, who was very helpful in helping us collect and shape feedback for the project, not in isolation, but in conjunction with a multi-year process for plan development and integrating the feedback from the master plan and resident and community input into the development here. So I can only speak to the sort of the more recent developments. I know that there's been a lot of community involvement in some of the prior iterations and discussions that Brian mentioned, including the housing production plan, the various design charrettes that were done on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, go for it, John. Sorry.
Go ahead. Brian?
I was gonna say the RFQ process it started up in September of 2019, and there were a number of community meetings that started in at that time, September, October 19, leading up to February, which is when the RFQ was issued. So there were a number of community meetings at that time in the fall of 19. Sorry.
Okay. There's a question regarding the choice or how the proportion of affordable units was selected or agreed upon, or were we trying to maximize that? And maybe between, I don't know, Lisa and Marty Jones, my recollection from the RFP was that there was no number specified, but can you comment on the typical proposal is 40 out of the 60 units. I don't have your slide right in front of me. Different people had different proportions of affordability and different income ranges provided. Can you, either one of you, comment on that?
I'm sorry, Don, what was in the RFP?
Yeah, the question is,
I think it's essentially why this particular mix, and were other mixes considered?
This is Dave again. I'm happy to take that on if you like.
Okay, go ahead.
So part of it was trying to read the RFP and be responsive to the RFP. And I think everybody has somewhat of a different interpretation of how they read the RFP. The other piece is that affordable housing sources are very specific with what they fund at the AMI level and at the unit mix level. And so if you use a certain source, you need to make sure that your project complies with the requirements of that source. So if you really dug into each of these as Mass Housing did, you would be able to sort of verify whether those matched up. And so we decided to use a set of financing tools that matches the mix that we proposed. Is there some give and take within that? Yes. And that's where sort of reading the RFP comes into play and making the best judgment as a developer in terms of meeting the requirements that the town put forth.
Okay, Marty or Lisa, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I will just add that the housing production plan certainly emphasizes the development of affordable housing units, and the RFQ did as well. So I think as part of the mix of looking at the whole package, it was certainly seen as a major positive that this particular development had the most number of affordable units.
Okay, Brian, there's a question about safe harbor. Can you begin by defining what safe harbor means and how this project will contribute both to the what's called the subsidized housing inventory and safe harbor status?
Sure, sure. So if the state basically urges cities and towns to have 10% of their year-round housing units be deed restricted affordable or on the subsidized housing inventory. The way so once you reach 10%, that's one way to reach safe harbor, which means that if another developer comes in trying to do an affordable housing project, that you would be able to turn it away based on need, saying that we don't need affordable housing in this location, and the reason why we don't need it in this location is because we have enough in town. Another way to receive safe harbor is to do what we have done, which is to permit 1% of our housing stock in a given year, which was through the River Street project. So by permitting the River Street project, that allowed us to go into safe harbor for 2 years. That safe harbor is up in March 21st of 2022. So next March. This project has the ability to put us into 1 year of safe harbor, but it matters on when it is permitted. So as soon as it's permitted, that's when it is eligible for us to be in safe harbor, which, as we just went through, won't be for a couple of years from now. I hope I answered the question.
Okay. Beth, a question for you. Can you describe during the construction process, and this may apply to the MBTA as well as this project, what precautions will be taken regarding noise, dust, debris, rats, anything else that could disrupt town life during construction? How is all of that controlled?
So certainly there hasn't been any detail given to the town at this point in the process. That would be something that would be discussed as part of the permitting process. If the developer has any specific information they'd like to add at this time, he's probably the best source of information.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. I think generally a couple things to say at this very early stage, which is we've built many of these types of buildings on tight, compact sites with lots of uses happening around them. And have been able to mitigate any issues as best as possible. I mean, obviously construction is construction, but I think from our perspective, we take the approach that we want to be treated, our neighbors should be treated as we would want to be treated if we were them, and just be communicative, have open lines if there are issues that they're having that we can address and take care of. And there's certainly a lot of steps that get put in place to deal with some of the sort of construction impacts that we normally see here. And we would submit a construction management plan prior to the start of construction to the town for review as well.
Okay, there's also a question, again, reverting back to jargon, our housing jargon of local preference, and would preference be given to existing Winchester residents, particularly seniors that may want to live at this location? And I don't know, Dave, do you want to answer that? Because you're good.
Sure.
You or someone will be managing the rental process and the
Sure.
selection process.
Sure. First thing is, so the quick answer is yes, there is a local preference. The town of Winchester needs to ask the Department of Housing and Community Development to allow that to happen. Usually they do. We would certainly be supportive of it. I would expect that would happen here. And basically what that means is that when we expect more than 60 applications for 60 apartments, many more applications for 60 apartments. So what happens is there is a lottery process that gets instituted so that there's fairness to all the applicants. But there is something that is in the law that allows for local preference in that lottery process. And so that would be instituted, and we would certainly be supportive of it and advocate for it to DHCD. The second piece is just sort of knowledge is power in the sense that if you want to live here and you are prepared and you have your materials ready, and the deadlines, and the town and we as the developer do a great job of getting the word out locally, then the chances are, that when time comes to review people's applications, they're going to be the ones who are ready and ready to go. It's a combination of that local preference, but also marketing and communications throughout the town.
Yeah,
John,
I cannot resist helping to answer this question from my Housing Partnership Board experience. One of the questions that comes up is who's going to live here, and the short and easy answer to that is that they likely will be people who are working in town but cannot afford to live here, and so they're employees of town businesses, employees of town government. On that, so the local preference terminology basically says preference is given to both residents of Winchester, current residents of Winchester, and people who are currently working in Winchester on that. So that's my housing 2 cents worth. The question that has come in that I'll I guess give Lisa first choice and Marty Jones second choice. There are people commenting that the financial terms are overly favorable to Civico and not favorable to the town. Can you comment on that? Either one of you comment on that statement, and Dave, you may want to comment as well. Lisa?
Sure. I mean, I'll sort of defer to the slide before where the town did do an appraisal on the lot. And we do believe that the LDA that we negotiated is above that appraised value. It does provide a significant amount of money upfront to the town, as well as ongoing costs for the 99-year lease, as well as an additional sale or refinancing percentage.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. I think that it's a good balance, you know, in order to incentivize anybody to develop something, there's got to be something for everybody around the table. And I think this is a good balance between a return for the town and giving the town the seat at the table for the long term. And also, you know, the town did come back and negotiate more than was proposed by the developer in the original proposal. So the town didn't just kind of accept what was there, but came back and negotiated more. So I think it's a fair deal for the town, and the town will have a lot of other intangible benefits. We've talked about a lot of them already, but the cost of building parking is very expensive. And that is something that the developer has included in their proposal. That is not a cost to the town. So, you know, there'll be some savings to the town in order to be able to actually continue to get hourly parking for people who are shopping downtown and supporting the businesses.
Okay, I've spotted one other question here. Do you anticipate that the business is currently located adjacent to this property on Church Street and Waterfield, are they going to lose money during the construction process? How will their businesses be protected? I don't know who wants to answer that one.
This is Dave. I can try and take that on. I think first thing is that I think we were the only developer to talk to business owners in advance of the proposal. And I think that sort of tells a little bit about how we work with people. And honestly, why we put in a parking layer in the first place. I heard loud and clear that was a major concern, and I can understand why it's a concern. And so I think it's not fair to anyone to say, oh, there will be no impacts to the business community while we're doing construction. I think there will be some impacts, and I think we all have to work together to figure out how to mitigate those. But I would stress that there would be impacts regardless of what the project is here. Any project that happens on this site would have impacts. So what you need to think about is who are we partnering with? And do we have, as Marty said, a seat at the table to solve issues as they come up? A fee simple sale, permitted, done, you know, it's really hard to have that seat at the table. And I think as well, you know, having a partner that has the experience working in these very tight spaces next to adjacent businesses so that we can build construction management plans with them, and making sure, you know, I talked many times, you know, about delivery schedules and how can we, you know, make sure our construction vehicles are not blocking their vehicles. Those conversations need to happen. They will happen with us, and we'll adjust as we go as well. And I think that's what we aim to do.
Let me squeeze in one final question because we're getting to be at 7 o'clock. Another question that's come up frequently in conversations is a concern that the building will not be maintained, it will not be modernized. How has that been addressed in the land development agreement? How will it be addressed in the land lease? And Dave, what are your standard procedures for ensuring that the building is maintained? So Lisa, do you want to go first?
Yes, so we've already started putting in those kinds of terms in the LDA agreement, and we have already started conversations about how we'll be integrating that into the ground lease in this next phase of negotiations. So there will be sort of standards and specific language that will speak to the requirements that the developer will have. I think the developer can sort of speak to their management team that they'll have on board, which was actually one of the things that we looked at in the request for qualification stage, is how they've been able to manage other properties and how they plan on managing this project, and potentially talk about any maybe refinancing or other funding that they'll have along the way to make those major developments periodically.
I think obviously, hopefully, we would never intend for it ever to get to a legal process in terms of maintenance of the building, and a couple things that we do. We do have a professional third-party property manager that we oversee. B, for affordable housing that is funded by the public sector, as you can imagine, the oversight is enormous by the Department of Housing and Community Development on forever. There are, financials are audited, and then they do regular housing checks annually on turnovers. Every 3 years, there's a full top to bottom capital needs assessment. So the oversight of affordable housing as compared to just market rate housing is really a process that hopefully people will understand. And I think when you look at comparable buildings that have been funded by the programs that we're going to use here, I think you will see 10, 20, 30 years down the road, the housing is high quality, well managed, kept up amazingly well, because there are so many people looking after it and making sure that we as developer and owner are doing what we have always promised we would do. And the second we don't do that is the second that our business doesn't continue. You can imagine that DHCD does not want to give any more money to any developer that does not maintain their properties. So there's many reasons, in addition just to, our good name, why we would make sure that this building is maintained to the highest quality standard. I also, if I'm allowed to, just to answer George, are we guaranteeing that the 40 spots would be open to the public? And the answer is yes. Those 40 spots would be open to the public. We would not have an ability to remove them from, public occupancy. And that's something that you can control in the ground lease that you probably couldn't control if you didn't have a ground lease. So I think there's a lot of other questions I would love to answer. And we've got an open house on Thursday night where we will sit at a table, take questions for as long as people would like. And I would love to see people there and appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Okay, just on the parking, could you just comment? The plan is, it's in your pro forma that there will be a charge for that public parking, right? Isn't that the plan at this point?
Yeah, so we have counted on some revenue from the parking, from the public parking. The reason is so that we can get some debt to cover some of the construction costs. We have not yet determined how that will work, what that parking structure will, or parking fee structure will look like. But we would welcome the opportunity to talk further with the town, further with business owners to figure out what is the right way to do this.
Okay, I have 7:05. So I've been scanning the Q&A. I'm sure I have missed many interesting and potential questions, but I'm going to turn this back over to Lisa Wong to wrap up and conclude. And I apologize for cutting anyone off or ignoring anyone's questions.
Right. There are a number of really great questions here. I was trying my best to do quick answers. I will be working on this the next 2 days. I actually hope to get all of these answered well before the developer open house. So you don't have to spend your time asking Dave these particular questions. So what I will do is I will have these on the town website at www.winchester.us/Waterfield. I can certainly also print up some copies of the Q&A and have those available at the open house. So folks will have that in front of them. But I'll be sort of looking back at the questions. I gave you a quick answer, make sure I answered them thoroughly, going back over the other questions. So I'm sorry we couldn't answer everything live, but if you have any other follow-up questions, please email me, townmanager@winchester.us. You can also call my office. we're certainly very open to any conversations or questions you might have. Okay, thank you everyone very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.